Hello, this is Pretty Guardian, and you are listening to the Pretty Nerdy podcast. I am joined today by my wonderful co host, Derek, aka I am the one who nerds.
How we doing, everybody?
Oh, we are doing so good because today we are going to be talking about Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Before we get started into it, I think it's important to know one of the most important facets of a co-host to co-host relationship. Pretty Guardian, how you doing today?
I am doing wonderful. Like I said, I've got my cappuccino over here and I'm just ready to talk about like all of our animated shows that we love together.
Absolutely. I had the pleasure of rewatching this over the week, and I am very much excited to talk about just how crazy this all gets. I guess my first question to you is, this movie is a little under 5 years old now. Maybe a little over, depending on when we release. I guess my question is, why are we still talking about this movie in particular? There are so many other Spider-Man movies. Why are we talking about this?
This one, for me, was the first Spider-Man animated movie that I've seen, and also its impact on animation as a whole, I think, has been just incredible. So many stylistic decisions that were made during the process of it being 3D animated, but then also having so many comic book elements incorporated into it. I think that in many ways it's changed a lot of the animation that we've seen moving forward from that period. So movies like on Netflix, they have Bad Guys, Puss in Boots, The Last Wish, and even this new Disney movie that's coming out, Wish. I think a lot of the stylistic choices being made in these films were absolutely originated here in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
I couldn't possibly disagree if I tried. This is by far one of my favorite comic book movies ever made. I don't mean favorite superhero movie, I mean favorite comic book movie. While the animation itself is pretty spectacular, Spider-Man, just how they were able to capture the feeling of flipping a page, going comic to comic. Sometimes the just how they explore the idea of what it would look like to have the spider powers done in a brand new way. And that's another thing I will say this movie does, is it does give us a new look at a character we are all very well familiar with, though entirely different from what we know.
It is a character we are familiar with and entirely different from what we know. I think that that was excellent verbiage. Something that I was thinking about with this movie is how this is in some ways like the first time I've really seen a very urban Spider-Man done, not just in the sense of like Miles Morales being a person of color, but in like a lot of the aesthetic choices of how they portray the city and also like the music and stuff in it, which was a wonderful soundtrack. But like looking back at the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire, I feel like he was not really in New York City. You know what I mean? Like, to me, that was kind of a down to earth Spider Man that could have been from a rural area just as easily as from the city. But in this one, I feel like that's very much part of his character and part of his story.
Absolutely. The environment you are born in and raised around does help shape you as a person. And I think that that is what we see in this urban environment. We see graffiti, but we also see that it's not like super mean streets. We have our villains, but they're not, what's the word I'm looking for? They're not so destructive that like people are cowering in fear every night. They have their hero. Yeah, we have our Spider-Man for the universe. And I think that's so important to the story that we receive. And I'm glad we get this. We get something so urban and something we don't really see. And you're absolutely right. Like the Raimi movies, while they're good in their own right, they feel more like a set versus like if I walked out into LA, I would not be seeing this kind of like the pretty side of things.
For our listening audience at home, could you give us like a brief rundown of the plot of this movie?
Absolutely. So, in short, we meet Miles Morales, who is just your average teen who has a cop dad, a medic mom, and kind of a nondescript job title uncle who Miles really looks up to. And he kind of like bounces his street art ideas off of his uncle, so they're really close. But one day when they go tagging in an area that nobody's going to care about, Miles gets bit by the number 42 radioactive spider, which is an interesting motif I want to explore a little bit more, but we'll get into that. We get an awkward teen slowly turning into Spider-Man, but not with the help of one Spider-Man, but an additional 5. And from there, villains come about, hijinks ensue, and we see a young man become a more confident man in the face of adversity.
In that regard, I think that this is one of the best origin stories I've seen in any Spider-Man film, period. Because we do see that awkwardness of him as a teenager, and then him going on these little missions with like the old school Peter Parker, and just kind of see his progression to the very end of the film where he starts to become a more actualized Spider-Man, his own Spider-Man. And I just thought that that was wonderfully portrayed in this.
I think while the other films do capture a form of awkwardness, with Toby, and he's only trying to get MJ, it feels like, and all of his awkwardness does seem to stem from that. This felt more like this was an all-encompassing awkwardness. His pants didn't fit right. His vision was better. He was starting to hear voices. Like, this isn't something we see too much of in the original Raimi and even Garfield.
That's one of the things that I think is so impressive about the way that they've used animation in this, is because they are able to control so many details that are a lot harder to control in live action. So I feel like they've used every ounce of this medium to their advantage.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we briefly touched on like the spider people. We see Spider-Gwen for the first time in cinema. Haley Sitfried does an amazing Spider-Gwen, in my opinion. Nick Cage as Spider-Man Noir. There were some truly amazing, out of left field spider people that we get to see. Which ones do you recall, and why?
Yeah, well, I think the primary ones are the ones that really stood out to me. So one of the things that I really like that this movie did with incorporating those spider people is I feel like no matter what version of Spider-Man you really love or really brought you in, I feel like they kind of gave that nod to the audience. So with like bringing the old school Peter Parker in there to help kind of bring Miles Morales up in his role as Spider-Man, I feel like they were kind of saying to the audience like, hey, we know who your Peter Parker is, and that's cool. This is how he's, elevating the voice of this new Peter Parker or this new Spider-Man with Miles Morales.
Yes.
And I just thought that that was really awesome. And then Spider-Gwen, her character was amazing. I love that they gave her just like that sliver of backstory enough to kind of launch her into this movie, and her character makes sense. Her costume design looks amazing. And the other ones, I feel like they added a lot of comedic relief, and they were kind of interesting in their own right. I don't think that they necessarily contributed to the overall plot quite the same as that trio did, but I definitely, I laughed at like Spider-Man Noir up in the corner of the room with his cape still billowing, even though there's no wind around.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of like little jokes and gags in there.
I think the thing that stood out to me most on my most recent rewatch is the choice to make each spider person actually feel like they came from another universe. Penny Parker was definitely more anime inspired, so was her mech. Spider-Man Noir is just heavy saturated blacks and whites. Spider-Pig is definitely straight out of a Tex Avery cartoon. And you don't need to necessarily even understand anything of what I just said, but it visually reads in a way that you're like, oh yeah, no, they're definitely from somewhere else, though you might not be able necessarily to place it.
One of my favorite aspects of this movie, and I'm gonna kind of pull you in on this one a little bit too. So, on your Instagram feed the other day, you had a post about how fathers should hug their sons. And I agree completely. I think that having that type of emotional relationship with your father is something that, like, every young man in this world should be able to have.
Mm.
And in this movie, we see Miles Morales and his relationship with his dad. And I think that that was one of the most earnest and touching father son relationships I've seen in a movie, period. How his dad just unashamedly loves him no matter what and has that sort of unconditional support for his son to be whoever he wants to be.
Yeah. I think that this is also something important for children to see, because how different Miles is from his father. He's kind of more of he's trying to dip his toes into like the rebel path where his dad is just the law, and to kind of allow yourself the freedom to explore that space. It's okay to be wrong and know that family is there for you, I think was also really important. So this is definitely something I think kids should see, is that you can be different from your father, but know that they will back you up, even if it's not necessarily the way you're looking to be backed up. I think another thing I want to talk about real quick is the fact that this was Stan Lee's last verbal role.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's his last couple of lines ever recorded, which I believe equate to it's when Miles is going to buy the spider suit after Peter Parker passes away. Say that a couple of times fast. And he says something along the lines of, I'm going to miss him. I think everybody here is going to miss him. And Miles asks if it doesn't fit, can he return it? And the line is something along like, the suit always fits, even if you're not necessarily fit for the suit. Which the gag is the gag then turns to a sign that reads no refunds or something, and he's just this wildly character, and I think that perfectly sums up the persona Stan Lee definitely had built over these past few years. What a send off! And it's also not the only time we see Stan Lee, apparently. He appears in every train shot of the film.
Well, you know, thinking back on it, I do remember seeing him there in a few of them, for sure. I mean, I'm sure he was there in all of them, but I'm remembering a few.
I missed that on this last rewatch. I'm cheating and I'm using IMDb, I'll be honest. The bagel Chuck onomatopoeia was originally not even supposed to be in the script, but somebody pitched it and the rest of the studio liked it, so they kept it in. What were some of the things you caught? Because this movie is full of Easter eggs. What are things you caught that you want to talk about?
Well, I think we can dig a little bit more into some of the ways that they did the animation, like the tingles that would come up on the screen when his spider senses were going. I thought that was really clever. There were like a lot of the ink blots as if it was like actually a comic book in the corners of the screen during certain pieces. That whole ending arc of him like swinging through the city where he's like finally doing it like a real Spider-Man, and you can see like the shift in the animation styles there. This whole movie is just a chef's kiss.
Oh god, it really is though. That's another thing I picked up, and I'm not looking at IMDb for this one. This is one I actually just know off the top of my head. When Miles is first from between the start of the film to where Miles is first bit to as he's training himself, the frame rate is slower. The other Spider-Men, Spider People, excuse me, they go at a slightly higher frame rate to kind of show that Miles needs to catch up. And The time he catches up is when he does that backflip off of the skyscraper, which is full of symbolism. They actually did that shot where it was actually flipped in animation. So what looks to us like he's falling in the animation, they had the buildings rise to him as if he's rising to the occasion to become Spider-Man.
Oh, that's powerful.
Right? Like, they put so much time into this movie, like so much thought and effort, and I think this is definitely worthy of animation study. The humor is also another thing I think we see. This one, the Spider-Man movies are known for their sense of humor. It's their style, but I feel like this one does it the best. And I think it is because of the acting chops of the comedians that we have on set. John Mulaney as Spider-Ham, that was great casting. He was so good. But like really shouldering the comedic timing of a lot of the jokes was Jake Johnson. His timing on a lot of these jokes goes from like, he could hit a depressing note and then in the next sentence hit a comedic note to make that depressing note just totally feel like it was nothing at all. Like, he does it so well, and I want to give Shamalik Moore his due as Miles. To go from the entire film, he's going from like an unsure kid to one that is much more confident in himself. And I feel like he deals with a lot of that in a very natural way. And I feel like I do the same kind of jokes of like, not necessarily dark humor, but like kind of dealing with a traumatic situation with a joke. And it felt natural. He did amazing deliveries.
Well, he did. So to talk about the humor a little bit further, one of the things that I really liked about a lot of the jokes is it felt like it was also character building. So an example here is when Peter Parker and Miles Morales they broken into the lab. Miles is hanging from the ceiling and he's stuck there because his little spider fingers are all tense and he can't unstick himself from the ceiling. And so Peter's like, okay, you need to relax. Just think of something that relaxes you. And Miles is hanging up there and he starts singing Sunflower until he like falls down. I thought that was amazing. And it was also like a good callback to the beginning of the film when his character is sitting there at the desk singing the song. So they really incorporated his character into that joke. It wasn't just a joke
Absolutely.
randomly thrown in.
Absolutely. And I think you're 1000% correct. It's another thing I feel like other studios do better than I'm not like bashing Disney, but I do think that a lot of studios understand humor a little bit better than Disney, where they'll run a joke into the ground, but like, it's just a joke. It doesn't necessarily hold any weight per se. Something like this is all character, like all these jokes are character driven. No line is wasted. And I feel like that's something that is very important in a film like this. Let's do a quick look at a character that was hinted at the beginning of the film and then was revealed to be so much more. And I want to talk about our Doc Ock.
Oh, yeah.
Voiced by Catherine Hahn before she became Agatha in WandaVision. This reveal, my first time watching it, I didn't put it together. Like, just like she was just some kind of background character that was then given foreground. And I think you get on the second pass, I think you get a hint. You see like one of her tentacles on the desk, but that's like all they give you. And they don't like focus on it or anything. It's just like you can catch it if you're looking for it, if you're looking for it. And it then when it's revealed that she is Olivia Octavius, oh my god, it was so good. I loved it. And she plays such a fun villain. She does definitely play it up a little bit more mustache twirly, but like, you feel pain there, and like she's doing this not necessarily for like financial gain, but like when she's fighting Peter, she's doing it out of a viciousness, out of a personal vendetta of some kind that we are never made privy to.
What did you think of Wilson Fisk in this movie?
I thought his design was amazing. Like the fact that he's built like a VW bug.
Oh, yeah.
Made him somehow more intimidating. And I don't know how. When he kills Spider-Man, you understand, oh yeah, no, I don't think I could survive that. His fists are basically 100-pound dumbbells. Like, that's his whole design. He looks like a caricature from a Tim Burton film, but it's not something I want to fight.
This was one of the most sinister Fisks that I've seen portrayed, even in like live action.
Yes. Because she's such an integral character to the Spider-Man universe. How did you feel Aunt May was done?
You know, this wasn't the most memorable Aunt May for me. What did you think?
I got to agree. I feel like this was a missed opportunity where she felt more like Alfred than having her own agency.
This was one of the few characters where I felt like they as writers felt compelled to include an Aunt May, even though it didn't necessarily need one for the story to work.
I agree. I feel like we could have had almost any other... This could have been Mary Jane, and the movie would have gone the same way. I want to talk real quick about the ending of the film. What were your thoughts on that?
Okay. I really liked the ending. I thought they had a climactic finish to the whole thing. The animation was beautiful. And it did leave me really excited for a sequel to the film, which we are finally getting here in June.
I think that visually stunning. Absolutely. Like, you could pause. I was once told by a professor when I was going to college about how you want to do cinematography. And he said you can tell a film is more focused on its cinema when you can pause it frame for frame, mute it, and everything looks like a art piece. And I can do that with the ending. Like, it could be the most wackadoo train flying through nothing imagery, and it looks stunning.
And a lot of times in animation, that's a lot harder to do because they have to blend certain frames or they use different techniques to cut corners. But that's not what you saw in this film. You could go through it frame by frame, and each one was practically a work of art.
And it was so seamless. Like you had mentioned the different elements working together. God, I don't know who's listening to this. I hope somebody on the production staff is listening. You guys were not paid enough. You guys did good. We're still talking about it 5 years later. This is truly a special film.
It is a special film. I wouldn't be surprised if people are talking about it decades from now.
Absolutely. It's definitely a case study. And I hope that this becomes something. Again, we talked about it being studied later. I'm looking forward to years from now when like more and more is revealed.
I was hugely disappointed in the early 2000s when animation in general made that shift from 2D hand-drawn sort of style to 3D. Like, I thought Toy Story, for all of its strengths, was visually an ugly movie. And so then all these 3D movies started coming out, and I was missing those classics from my childhood. And then, boom, this movie comes out. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, these people are actually using this medium to their advantage now. And that's an incredible turning point for the industry.
I'm in that same boat where I feel like the transition from solely hand-drawn animation to a more computerized animation style, I feel like we're missing something. I feel like hand-drawn is a dying art. I didn't study animation. I just appreciate it. So I can't speak with any sort of gravitas on it, but I will say that when I do bump into things like Into the Spider-Verse, like Has Been Hotel, like you recognize the distinction nearly immediately. And while they might use computers, you can tell that the core values and fundamentals are there. And I feel like this needs to be celebrated and needs to be brought to the forefront. Not to say that this movie is like an underground success by any stretch of the imagination. This did box office buco bucks. So it is good, but I want to see it celebrated more, damn it. The budget was 90 mil. And opening weekend, it made 35. The gross worldwide was 384 mil. So yeah, this movie it's by no stretch of the imagination an indie darling, but it definitely I'd love to hear more about it. Come on, guys, let's hear about it. With that, we're near end here. With the new film on its way out, my question to you is, what do you want to see from Spider-Verse into Multiverse?
So I know off the top of my head what I would really love to see more of, and this is just me. I really want to see more of Spider-Gwen and more of her story kind of incorporated in there, especially since it seems like she's going to be a recurring character in this upcoming film. And then I'm just really looking forward to seeing a more actualized Miles Morales. You know, at this point, he's fought some villains. He's in the zone. I'm just kind of excited to see him as a more fully fledged Spider-Man at this point.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely be getting those for sure. I'm looking forward to Oscar Isaac as Spider-Man 2099. We get a glimpse of that at the end credits, what that's going to look like. I am curious to see it's a throwaway gag. But with how we had described every joke kind of meant something. I think Spider-Ham giving Miles his hammer as like a going away gift. I want to see that actualized in the sequel somehow. I would love it if that was a connective tissue, and it would also kind of inspire people to go, wait, why does he have that? And just go and rewatch the film. I'm looking forward to seeing more Spider-Man actualized. If for some reason there's a good chance you might not know, for our listening audience, that all these spider people are based off of actual comics. So if any of them spoke to you, if you want to see Spider-Man go beat up Nazis, Spider-Man Noir is a thing. If you want to read up on the adventures of Miles Morales, he's a thing. These are all real characters, Penny Parker, and we're going to be seeing more and more, and some of them are based on real spider people. I hope, and it's ridiculous, but I can't help it. I love kaiju. Spidersaurus Rex, I want to see him actualized, if only for the laughter. Like, it's so silly, but yeah, like, it's a T-Rex in a Spider-Man outfit with whipping. Go support your local comic book shop if these sound like characters you want to go get your info on. Yeah, that's my soapbox. I'll go ahead and step off now.
I think that's fantastic. I'm feeling like we're at a good cutting off point. I was wondering if you wanted to plug any projects you're working on or your channel and kind of wrap things up here.
Okay, that sounds great. You can find me at the YouTube channel Bonus Commentary, where I will be discussing films in their various forms, animation, live action, whatever. And I'll be looking forward to having more guests like our lovely Pretty Guardian, as well as some others. You can also find me on Twitch as I am the one who nerds. I know it's a mouthful, but I promise you'll find me. And Pretty Guardian, where can we find you?
You can find me right here at youtube.com/prettyguardian. I make all kinds of fun gaming reviews, and nerd culture related videos.
Awesome. Again, a big shout out and thank you to all the people that have been listening to the podcast as of recently. We made this as kind of like, oh, hey, wouldn't it be cool if? And it's kind of taken off on its own and become something because of the comments we've been getting. Not just in our comment section, but like people have reached out personally. So it does really mean a lot to hear back from you guys about this stuff. So thank you very much for listening.
I just want to second everything that was said right there. When we see those comments or we get that feedback, it's really wonderful as a content creator to know that your work means something to somebody and that it's reaching its intended audience out there. So please, comment, let us know what you think, because that's kind of one of those things that motivates us to keep doing more.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, until the next one, be sure to subscribe to Pretty Guardian, and be sure to subscribe to Bonus Commentary, so that way when we do these back and forth channel videos, you know when we're going live with this stuff. And until the next one, be sure to take care of yourselves out there, everybody.
We'll see you next time.
Well, okay. I'll cut that out.
You can't cut out the bleh.
I'll leave it somewhere, I'm sure.